Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. We're Penny and Jenny, and if this is your first time tuning in, we're so glad you're here. This is the podcast where we explore what it means to build thoughtful, grounded communities shaped by our local lives, but enriched by ideas and experiences from around the world. For us, meaningful change starts with listening, really listening, especially to experiences that challenge or expand our own. This is the core conviction behind everything we do. We believe that listening matters, and that's why today we're finally dedicating a podcast to this subject, listening. We started to notice it all around us and in our own lives that listening was becoming more and more difficult. The juggling of family, work, and other commitments, and the constant pull of being reachable, always on, always connected. We started to notice the quiet ways our devices were infringing on our intention, on our presence, with our children, our friends, our communities. That subtle but growing struggle to really switch off and be fully there. Maybe listening was already becoming harder before the digital boom, but it's hard to argue that it hasn't made it a whole lot worse. Because now we're all finding it increasingly difficult to be truly present, whether that's in conversation, resisting the urge to check a device, or even something as simple as watching a TV program without reaching for the phone to check for messages. We can now ping tens, hundreds, even thousands of people in seconds. And yet how often do we really sit down and have deep, uninterrupted, in-person conversations? In particular, one-on-one. With busy lives, this doesn't often just happen by coincidence. It almost has to be planned in advance. We seem more inclined also to stay at home than to go out and to listen and share. And somewhere along the way, it feels like society has shifted, placing more value on individual achievement than on the collective whole. And perhaps as a result, listening has become a skill many of us have forgotten, or maybe were never really taught in the first place. Think about it. Did your parents truly listen to you growing up? Or was it more of a culture of be seen and not heard? And even if that wasn't the case at home, was that kind of listening encouraged in school, by society? Our attachments in life are built through listening. It starts in infancy with caregivers responding to us and continues through friendships, relationships, work, and everyday life. But could it be the case that we often assume we know the people closest to us, what they think, what they feel, what they'll say? Psychologists talk of the closeness communication bias, the idea that familiarity can make us complacent, leading us to overestimate how well we understand those we love. As the British anthropologist Robin Dunbar points out, one of the primary ways we maintain relationships is through everyday conversation. But that simple question, how are you, only matters if we're truly listening to the answer. Otherwise, we slowly lose touch with someone, who someone is and who they're becoming. Because people change, opinions shift, beliefs evolve, and no matter how long we've known someone, if we stop listening, we eventually lose our understanding of who they are. The good news is that research shows listening is something we can improve with practice and with intention. But what can motivate us to do that? Because right now it can feel harder than ever to prioritize. And there's also a deeper layer to this. Attachment theory tells us that when we have someone in our lives who truly listens, someone we feel connected to, we feel safer stepping out into the world. We know that if something unsettles us, we have somewhere to return to. Someone who'll hear us, hold the space, and help us make sense of it. That's what's known as a secure base, and it's a powerful buffer against loneliness. Listening isn't passive. It requires us to be receptive, to create space, to be open, to be present, and to expect the same in return. Jenny and I often talk about the idea that we may now need to intentionally schedule listening, to carve out time in our busy lives to be distraction-free, to listen to our loved ones, to our communities, to the world around us, to simply be present. Maybe we even need to start becoming prescriptive about this. And that conviction is exactly what led us to create our Are You Really Listening workshop events, interactive, speaker-led spaces designed to do just that, because we believe we need more spaces that allow for it, safe, intentional third spaces where listening's not the exception, but the norm. Because ultimately, in a world that at times feels more divided than ever, perhaps the answer isn't to speak louder, but to carve out intentional time and listen more deeply. So before we hear from our wonderful guests today, I'd like to share a few quotes that invite us to think on this theme maybe a little bit more deeply. Roy T. Bennett in The Light in the Heart. Listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, act with integrity. The greatest problem with communication is we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. When we listen with curiosity, we don't listen with the intent to reply. We listen for what's behind the words. And Ursula Le Guin in A Wizard of Earthsea. For a word to be spoken, there must be silence before and after. And M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Travelled. You cannot truly listen to anyone and do anything else at the same time. And Sarah Dessen in Just Listen. This is the problem with dealing with someone who's actually a good listener. They don't jump in on your sentences, saving you from actually finishing them or talk over you, allowing what you do manage to get out to be lost or altered in transit. Instead, they wait, so you have to keep going. And Surah Hart in Respectful Parents, Respectful Kids. Listening is an attitude of the heart, a genuine desire to be with another, which both attracts and heals. And on that note, I will pass to Jenny to introduce our guests today, please.
Thank you, Penny. I'm so happy to be doing this podcast and obviously to have our guests here. We have inadvertently fallen into our work becoming about listening through our youth space as parents ourselves and putting a bit more of a lens over that, and also our other events trying to bring families together and intergenerations to have that opportunity to hear one another. And so today's panel are three people who are putting listening at the centre of their work as well, and I can't wait to hear from them. So we have Corine Jansen is a practitioner and facilitator whose work has explored how listening and silence function as ethical acts in professional life and leadership since 2009. She is the co-founder of the Global Listening Movement. She works with a practical architecture of listening, the movement's 5 movements: attention, addressing, making space, acknowledging, and responding, in context shaped by emotion, competing interests, and power differences. Her approach is grounded in phenomenology, hermeneutics, and ethical philosophy of Emmanuel Levinas, with a core conviction that listening is never neutral. It shapes what is allowed to exist, what gets filled in prematurely, and what is truly returned to the other person. Jenny Smith spent 3 decades managing crisis services supporting thousands of marginalised people across addiction, mental health, and girls and women's work. Throughout that time, she trained and supported teams in one consistent discipline: how to truly listen. Now working independently, Jenny offers one-to-one deep listening sessions and group courses built around what she calls receptive listening, a practice of slowing down, working with silence and stillness, and coming into a more authentic relationship with ourselves and others. Her core conviction, formed over 30 years of frontline work, is simple and profound. The place from which we listen to each other is the single most significant factor in what makes a difference to the experience of being truly heard. And Dr. John Coleman trained as a clinical psychologist at the Middlesex Hospital in London. He has a long-standing interest in children, young people, and families. He was the founder and director of the Trust for the Study of Adolescence, 1988 to 2005. He was appointed a senior research fellow in the Department of Education at Oxford University, 2006 to 2015, and is currently a visiting professor at the University of Bedfordshire. He is the author of many books, including Why Won't My Teenager Talk to Me, 2018, The Teacher and the Teenage Brain, 2021, and The Psychology of the Teenage Brain, 2024. He has served as a policy advisor in the Department of Health and was chair of the Association for Young People's Health from 2008 to 2019. He was a trustee of Family Lives from 2012 to 23 and acts as a consultant to a range of voluntary sector organisations. He was awarded an OBE in 2001 for his services to young people. Right, Penny, let's get this conversation going and let's listen to what everyone has to say.
Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to hear from everybody. So I'd like to go to Corine first today. Welcome. As we've mentioned in the introduction, you've designed an entire architecture of listening based on 5 distinct movements, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that. But before we get into the mechanism and the mechanics of that, I'd love to ask, what was the specific moment that you realized listening needed a global movement? And what were you seeing that the rest of society was missing? Quite a big
well, I wouldn't put it like that, but you mentioned earlier that we are divided more than ever, and this divide has no boundaries. It's global. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you're looking, into families, into universities, into countries. It's really everywhere. And I think when Avi Kluger, Adi, and I were sitting together, we noticed that listening can't be just a personal interest of research or doing your job, or in my case, listening to people in grief or with very problematic chronic illnesses. It feels like we need to start a community so that people can be connected around the world to create some kind of energy, to build a space where people dare to say, I don't know, I'm curious, I want to learn. Who are you? Tell me about it. And it would be very easy to put everything into science. And there is a lot of science about listening. Through the years, there's an immense amount of science. But we thought, well, let's create something globally where people can meet around the world with just the feeling we all experience once in our lives, how it felt to be really listened to. And that experience can be a connection to someone else, to offer it to someone else. And so it started really very personally. And we very much realized that it was larger than individual conversations. It became more cultural. And I think we just stepped out of the pandemic, and in the pandemic there was a lot of tension within families and friends and stuff. And so the absence of listening to a person with different perspectives, with different views, we saw it in our families, but also in public life, but also in healthcare, in education, in leadership. And I think that was the reason why we thought, let's see what we can create. So it was not something we just noticed and nobody else. It was just something very personal that became something very global.
It's amazing. And I think it's in the work that we're doing, it's that vulnerability. And I think what you're talking about is that you almost needed to create that community to offer that space for that vulnerability. And I think many people are put off sharing because of that, right? Because it's so raw and exposing, I suppose. And if you don't feel safe to do that with the people around you, you're just not going to do it at all. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think people wouldn't do it at all. But if you experience yourself what the power of truly listening means and how it makes you feel, maybe it's can create a feeling of, why shouldn't I share it with another person? So that's why I really like the community feeling within our global listening movement, because I think we all want to feel heard. And very often we also try to do our best to get the best possible understanding we can get. But I think people don't need immediately understanding always. I think that people need enough safety to appear as human being with their honesty. And so for me, listening is not a skill, and it's also not a technique. It's a way of being with someone else. And as I was working in healthcare, especially when I was working with people with dementia, I noticed I can't understand them, but I can be and stay with them. So I can travel with them and not thinking this sounds weird or this can't be true, because that's not what listening is about. Listening is about paying attention, safety, creating space. So yeah, it's about human dignity. And that is something, it's come from the heart. And if you experience that and you really notice how it changed you, then I think something is happening. So it's hard because we're not trained. But the question is, yeah, of course, we know from science you can train. But for me, from an ethical point of view, it's more than that. It's more than that. Yeah. I don't know if I answer your question. Sorry.
No, you did. And for me, Corinne, is, where you say about it's to identify that moment from your kind of work is quite difficult. And we know that there's so many layers to the society that we're in now. And you mentioned the pandemic, which got me thinking. And you mentioned naturally, it was very difficult, very traumatic for a lot of people. And there was tensions, but also it slowed down life. And I think that as you subsequently spoke as well about that presence, thinking back to the pandemic as well, some people, not always, but you had the opportunity to be more present with the people in your house, okay, if that was positive or negative. And then I often look back at the pandemic and think their normal life resumed, and we're all so busy. And for me, that presence is such a requirement for listening, just that, okay, you've got the challenge of the distractions or your phone or the work you need to do or the household tasks, but just to be with people, and so those opportunities to be heard or to listen to someone is there more naturally. And I think that's challenge. It made me think how personally I had opportunities in the pandemic to be truly present with my husband, my children, because life was simpler. I was also Zooming with my friends to catch up, because we had, we wanted to check in, we needed that connection, and we would listen to each other. But it almost gets added to a to-do list now. I'm going to, be honest, from a parenting perspective, I must make sure I listen to how my son's day has been, or make sure I give them space to listen, rather than just having that physical presence, I guess, to enable it. So that's what really resonated from what you said.
And I think also the nuances that have got lost with the digital world, in part because are we listening? That'd be an interesting kind of question. Like when we're communicating by messaging or whatever, emails or whatever, that response, we're not seeing the whole person, are we? So when we're talking of listening, that's not actually the audible side of it, and we're not necessarily picking up on the whole message. And I think that is also where the response is also so very different, right? How do you interpret what that person is sharing with you or not? And that has also added to that confusion, I think.
Yeah.
Corine, could you tell us a little bit about your 5 movements then, please?
Well, I have to admit, I started working with listening in healthcare in the Netherlands in an academic hospital. And it sounded like you need a definition and you need some kind of steps you have to make, or, well, depth into your listening. And immediately, because of the people I was listening to, most of them were dying. So it requires a total different way of connecting to people. And so that was the moment I got interested in the very small things of pauses, just to think, to feel the silence, the acknowledgement of what is going on without understanding, but also the repair. And the ethical question is then, what did I intend? And it's not only about the intention, but the ethical question is also, what was the effect of my presence on the other person who wanted to share a story? And in my work, I was really searching for ways out of the skill, out of the techniques, because I'm a humanist. So I was really looking for that. And then, well, it's not coincidence, but Emmanuel Levinas passed my way. And I got interested in him. And when you look at him and how he is looking to the other person, I thought, we don't need some kind of rigid method, but a way of helping people, because listening can be helpful. You don't know, but it can be helpful. Remain attentive, correctable, present. So it requires some inner discipline, and I couldn't find it. And then I thought, okay, let me start my journey with Levinas, see what he came up with from my background, working with grief, with illness and uncertainty. And then I thought, okay, it's not about understanding. That's not what Levinas is mentioning, but it's about recognizing. Do you recognize me as a whole human being? And then that's where I came up with the architecture of listening. And I have to admit, I'm still working on it. It's work in progress. But the 5 ingredients are just ingredients. They're not steps. There is not a linear version of it. You have to go this, you have to go there. It's just to remind you that in listening, it's never about you, but always about the other. And this architecture is about being aware. I hope it will make people aware of where is the other in you. Do not try to embrace the other into your own recognition, into your own perspective, into your own values. Just let them be the other. And in my very humble opinion, I couldn't find it, because most of the people are defining listening in methods. And a human being can't be forced into a method, into a skill. And that's why I came up with the architecture of listening. And the most important thing for me is that you are aware of your judgments, because we all have judgments the whole day about everything and everyone. And you can't get rid of it because it's part of you, but you can be aware of what you're thinking, and you can be aware of, is this what I want to ask something that is important for me, or does it create space for the other? Because it should be about the other. And can my question make a repair for the other or not? So I think the most important thing about the architecture is, if you really have the intention to listen, don't think, okay, if I do this, I will be a good listener. Because you can never tell that you are a good listener. People who say, I'm a good listener, I'm having doubts about those people, because every situation, every person, every context is different. And you're always confronted with yourself when you're listening. And it's so listening is very courageous because you don't know what you will hear. But every question, every word you're using, every interruption you are doing, you have to be aware that you can bring the other to your space instead of let the other be in their space. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, the architecture is just a reminder to get the best possible effect for the other, and that hopefully is, I'm recognized.
Yeah, and I think that's so important that you say about like removing the ego almost, right? So, and what I do find difficult though with listening is knowing when is just to offer the space and actually even at the end not bring anything to the table, or when actually something is wanted. And I do think there are different instances, right? Sometimes you just want someone to listen and I give the empathy, the feeling in that moment. I get what you're, I have empathy for you in this moment, but sometimes we are also looking maybe for solutions. So that's another skill, right?
Yeah. It's not easy, Penny. It's not easy. But in my assumption, listening is not about, well, mostly it's not about, do I get it right? Mostly it's about, do you feel heard?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the most important thing for me in my architecture. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Corine. I'm going to move on to Jenny now. Welcome, Jenny. You say that listening without trying to fix creates a space where nervous systems can relax and clarity naturally occurs. Can you tell us more about what you've witnessed when that happens, please?
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing you, Corine. I really enjoyed what you shared, and a lot of it resonated. Yeah, so, I think this distinction about when we're really purely listening and when we tip over into giving advice, finding solutions, all of which have got their place, but they're not listening. And it's kind of that, there's this umbrella of communication, and listening is something really distinct. And in my experience, when people really want to be heard and really need to be listened to, there's often a kind of undercurrent of, is it safe? Will I be judged? Will my feelings be validated? Is it okay to be as I am? So people often come with some unease. And as a listener, if we respond from a place of almost joining that unease, seeing the person as something to be fixed, a problem, we start to kind of amplify that energy field of something's not okay. If, on the other hand, we root ourselves into the here and now, the presence, And in nervous system language, I would say into regulation. If we're rooted in a regulated space, our nervous systems are communicating with each other all the time as humans, as beings, as creatures. We invite the person's system to settle and to actually become a little bit more spacious. And through that process, which is called co-regulation, if we join the person in their anxiety, we're kind of co-dysregulating. But if we invite the person into a regulated space, we create a co-regulation between us. From that place, space naturally emerges and the person can start to find their own answers. If we're feeling anxious, parts of our brain go offline. We don't have capacity to parts of our thinking. We can't kind of consider things. We have much more limited kind of choices. We've got tunnel vision. We're more judgmental. From a co-regulated space, we start to be more creative. Different choices start to come. So by accompanying somebody through simply listening, those possibilities start to come up for themselves. And I managed a national self-harm service for girls and young women that was based in Bristol in England. And understandably, a lot of the girls and young women that we supported approached us very warily. It's a very stigmatized subject. A lot of them were not wanting to stop. They were wanting to understand how to self-harm with more safety. They were imagining that our response would be, you need to stop, da, 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 da. So it was a very difficult beginning of communication with people. And our intention was always to be empathic, to really acknowledge their experience. And what we saw again and again was the feedback was those young women would say to us, I didn't think I was going to be able to say this to you. I'm able to actually say what I need to say now. So rather than, getting into some script, we had really honest conversations. And I think that's a signature of listening. You might not hear what you want to hear or what you think you should hear, but you hear what's true. You hear what's really happening. If you can resist that very human impulse to make something better, in inverted commas, to fix a perceived problem.
Or to have the answer as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
and then
very
you can only
seductive,
properly see them then, right? Then you really see what the issue is. Whereas if you'd have then started prescripting whatever, we wouldn't have heard the truth.
Absolutely. And there's something so vulnerable for both the speaker and the listener, because if we let go of having the answer and join the person in the moment, in the present, we're simply exploring together in the dark, really, trusting that we will find our way. And that means, putting down this idea of being expert, having answers, being further along in some way than the person we're listening to. It's a beautiful journey of vulnerability together.
Yeah, and you can't really be an expert for someone else, really, because they're the only person who really knows what's going on for them anyway.
Yeah.
Jenny, as you talk, this idea of co-regulation is really fascinating for me as a friend and as a parent. So you think about the people, I'm thinking about the people that I listen to most and that I feel a duty to listen to, okay, be it friends. And you've made me reflect, and I will continue to do this, on what is my nervous system response or emotional response, obviously linked, but if you don't know how deep to understand it, or my initial reaction, to what this person is sharing with me, and what am I bringing to that partnership as a listener, and ultimately probably sometimes I become the speaker as well. It would work towards that co-regulation. And I guess for our listeners, what I'm thinking of, and these scenarios I'm thinking of, is when you catch up with a friend, maybe unplanned, let's say, and they're sharing their latest experience that may have caused them stress or upset. And if it's something that you resonate with, you often can respond with a similar emotion, because you're like, so annoying when that happens, like, oh yeah, you know. But actually you've lost, you're muddying that space to actually really hear them. And when I mentioned earlier about the times where you could just kind of no pressure give that space, I think where the most powerful listening is when there's not that scheduled or prescribed time or moment where someone is, say, offloading or sharing, for positive word, where actually you're just being. But that's difficult these days, because then you could listen because you didn't feel obliged to let them know you support them, or that what they're feeling is okay, you know, because I feel like that too. Or, you know, the parent and scenario I'm thinking of is, you know, my son is angry and I want to listen to him, but I'm telling him how important it is. I'm the speaker when he should be the speaker, because I'm telling him how important it is for him to tell me how he's feeling, you know, because I'm either passionate about him communicating his skills, or maybe I'm also angry and I'm trying not to be angry. I'm trying to be understanding. It's so complex, but that idea of the power of co-regulation, of coming together in this partnership of a speaker and listener, it's really, really something quite interesting, and I'm going to definitely take forward to.
And I wanted to add, I'm just thinking around the language around listening. Like, what is the most often time we use the word listen in parenting is, will you listen to me? Will you, you know, what are we asking in that moment? We're not giving them the space to be listened to. Isn't that like such a contradiction in terms? I mean, it's crazy. Jenny, I'd love to ask you as well. Like, we've spoken a lot about how listening is almost a responsibility, but it's also a duty, and it takes a lot of effort. But what about the other side of it? Isn't it also something that we're gaining? Is that something like we're getting some nourishment as well from those conversations?
Absolutely. I really feel that. And I can feel it right now. Like, I can feel the quality of our shared attention is really nourishing. Like, something in my system is getting nourished by us all joining our attention together. And I think if we can learn to listen to ourselves, and initially it might be, you know, listening to all those judgments that come through, or the ways you want to pull back or come in too quickly and all of that. But if we go through that, it's a bit like meditation practice, go through the initial kind of real chatter, we can start to hear something or sense something that is deeply nourishing. And my experience is that I can rest in that as a listener. You know, I can actively rest in something that's listening, and it's not even personal. It's not I'm listening, it's listening is happening through me, you know, if that lands as a statement. And it you know, I can't even claim it. I think there is something that is innately listening in us as humans. We're built to listen. We're very sensitive creatures, and if we can find our way through the noise, external and internal, then something's waiting to embrace us, really, which then conveys its attention without us having to say, look, I am really listening to you and I really get you. And our attention, that listening attention, that conveys it for us.
You've got 10 minutes before I've got to go to the next meeting, or I've got to jump on a podcast, which is what I just did to my dad. Sorry, Dad.
Yeah. And we sometimes have to say that. That's real life. You know, we have to say those boundaries. But actually, if we say, I've got 10 minutes, and 10 minutes is a lot. If we're present for 10 minutes with somebody, that people can go away feeling super nourished from that.
So Jenny, when you say, like, for our listeners, or for me and Jenny, whatever, what is that sort of first tip or advice you would give about, are we first of all looking inward? So we're starting to question, are we being more perceptive in our everyday, trying to be more aware of things? What would you suggest is like a good first step to sort of get us along?
I think, you know, somebody's mentioned curiosity, and curiosity about what are our listening habits. You know, when we're listening, get interested. What do we do? You know, does my attention go into my body? Do I notice my thoughts, or is my mind ahead, or am I very focused just on the person? Get interested, and then from that start widening. What happens if I include, you know, if I'm really in and just focused on my own somatic sense? What happens if I include a bit of the environment in my attention, kind of widen out a little bit? Or if I'm really out, what happens if I come in a little bit? It's getting really curious about what our listening habits are, I would say, is a really good first step. And then it's a process of unfolding. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say whether we're actually looking at the person while they're talking to us is a very simple thing, but a lot of the time it might also not be.
Yeah, and just a little addition to that, you can't get it wrong. You know, when we turn towards our own laboratory, ourselves as a laboratory of like, what, you know, we're just experimenting, we're all trying things out all the time. If we bring that kind of attitude, then if you notice, wow, I look like I'm listening, but really I'm thinking about blah, 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 which we can all do and all do, then that's great feedback. You've learned something. So if you can bring that real kind of generous curiosity to ourselves that isn't about getting it right or wrong, you know, like Corine said, it's not about getting it right. It's about what's actually happening. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd love to turn to John now, please. Welcome, John. Your work focuses a lot on teenagers, and you've written lots and lots of books about this. Can you tell us a bit about the teenage brain and listening, and what makes that such a difficult thing during adolescence?
Yes, thank you. Well, it's fascinating to hear Corinne and Jenny. My work really is about the interface between parents and adolescents. And I think understanding the brain is a hugely important element of this, because one of the things that parents say so often is that this stage is such a puzzle. We don't understand it. We don't understand why our sons and daughters used to be warm and cuddly and chatty, and suddenly they've become something quite different. So I think the new knowledge that we've got about the brain and what happens in adolescence is hugely important, and really does help parents and professionals make sense of what's happening. I think that the point about the communication, you all talk about listening, I talk about communication, but we can say listening is really that in order for young people to be able to talk to adults, particularly to parents, they have to feel that they're being listened to, what you've all said, that they are heard. And sometimes for adults, that's very, very difficult, as Penny said, if you feel angry and so on. But of course, what's happening in the brain means that there is a restructuring going on. And so the young person feels uncertain about what is going on inside them. They feel confused because of the way that the brain is restructuring itself at this time. And that leads to a sense of uncertainty. And it's very hard to really share important things to someone else, someone important to you, if you're uncertain. And what young people say to me is, it's really hard because my emotions are going up and down. It's hard, it's hard to regulate your emotions because of the hormone issues that are happening as a result of the brain changes. And so if you've got all this stuff going on inside you, it's so much harder to share things with parents. And I think that's a really important element. But it's also true that there are lots of things that parents can do to make things easier. And one of the things that young people say is that my parents aren't really listening to me. They're either nagging me about things, or they're questioning me, interrogating me. So you start off with this sense of this mismatch, if you like. We also know that young people, are much more likely to talk at times which are very inconvenient for parents, often late at night, or when they're feeling that they can talk. And the other important thing, I think, is because of this, I won't say turmoil, but certainly uncertainty inside young people, there is a sense of wanting to keep things to yourself until you're ready to talk. And I remember a young woman said to me, my mum says I never tell her anything, but I do tell her things once I've sorted them out in my own mind. And I think that's really important, the timing issue, and the sense that, young people do need some privacy to get things sorted out. And I think that's another thing that can be really helpful for parents to understand. So I think the brain is important, but I also think that all the things that are going on for parents do make communication or listening, if you like, more difficult. I think that there is more anxiety in a parent because of the things that you are worried about. You're not sure what's happening. Things are being held back from you and so on. But also you can be really, really angry with young people, frustrated and angry. And I know that from my own experience. I know it from my professional work. Young people have the capacity to wind you up. And so one of the things that's so important for parents is to learn to manage those feelings, to step back. And one of the things I'm always saying to parents is they're not doing it to you. You feel as if they're doing it to you, but what's happening is that it's because of what's happening inside. And it's not about you, it's about them. And if you can acknowledge that, take that into account, it just gets so much easier. So, yeah, I think there's a huge amount that we can do. As I say, I'm involved in running lots of workshops for parents of teenagers. It's hugely rewarding because actually, parents report back and say things are different. I feel that I understand a bit what's going on inside the young person, but also some of the things that we talked about in terms of communication. Timing is important. Whose agenda is it? Don't always force your own agenda down their throats. Make sure that they feel that their agenda is, allowable and acceptable. One of the things that one of I think it was a social worker who said in the workshops, to parents, just remember you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that proportion. You probably all heard that before. I think that's probably as much as I want to say. I think that really helping adults to communicate better with their sons and daughters when they're going through this stage is just so important. It makes a huge contribution to family life. If you really can help the young person feel that they are being listened to, so many other conflicts will become easier. I won't say they'll be resolved, but they will become easier. Okay, I'll stop there.
I just wanted to say, to return to that, you can't close your ears, can you, either? Whereas the mouth you can. So that's always that is why we're meant to listen, because you can't shut it down. Amazing. It's such important work, John. And, a lot of the time from the events that we're doing as well, I think, there's that sort of, I don't know whether that comes up in what you're seeing, but I think we do think we are listening maybe. And then actually when you put the 2 generations into a room and actually remove them from the sort of everyday, what's going on, and give them that sort of space in order to explore that together, it's fascinating then what does come up. And I think as a parent, more than anything, we do want to get to the crux of that. We do want to understand what's really going on. But we often don't, not indulge is the wrong word, but we don't give ourselves that space to find out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and there's lots of activity, lots of examples of things that people have done to help with that. One of the things I've been doing is working with a school where they put the young people in one room and the parents in another, and ask each to decide what they want to say to the other. And then they put them both together, of course. And there's so much laughter, and there's tears as well. But, you know, giving each the space to decide what they really want to share with their parents, and parents deciding what they want to share with their teenagers is so good. So things like that can really, really help. But yeah, I see it as a really important thing. I mean, I haven't said as much about what happens in the brain, so I don't know if you want me to say a little bit about that. So what we've learned since the advent of scanning really is that the teenage years are a time when there's probably more change in the brain than at any other time apart from during infancy. And the main things that are happening are that as I said, the brain is restructuring in the sense that, and this is counterintuitive, is that in fact there is a reduction during this period in the grey matter. And this is something that is a really important thing. It only happens at one other time, which is around the second and third year. And the reason that you get what's called pruning is that it actually makes the brain more efficient. What has happened is that there's been an explosion of the neurons and therefore the connections, and there are too many of them. And so the brain has a way of allowing the unwanted connections to die away. But that means that the brain's restructuring itself. So change is going on. And that, as I've said, leads to a sense of uncertainty. And these changes really do take quite a long time, probably till the end of the adolescent period. And the changes lead to the necessity for the different sites to really embed the networks that help. So, for example, there's two key areas. There's the bit at the front here, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is if you like, the area of thinking, reasoning, problem solving, and so on, and communication. And then the bit deep down here, which is to do with emotion, called the amygdala. And these two have to work together. And so the networks gradually get mature, they get more responsive to each other, and that allows the individual young person to manage their emotions better. And that's a really important process. So in brief, you're getting during these years a much bigger change in the brain than at most other times. And this leads to all sorts of behavior which parents find puzzling. You know, obviously the flip-flop of emotions, that's one thing. The sense of anger and the emotions, but also the wish to confront, and the sort of development of this sense of identity, becoming real, becoming a mature person. And these things lead into and affect, obviously, the relationship with parents. So I think that's probably enough for me. But yeah, it's a very important.
No, it's so important. It's just, you know, we've been speaking about it throughout, how difficult listening is. And then for a teenager, it's like double whammy because you're dealing with everything else at the same time. Corinne, you wanted to add something.
No, I was just really interested thinking about it, because I just want to say that in my humble opinion, teenagers notice very quickly when adults are waiting to respond. And what you just mentioned, John, is that they need time to think and to come up with their story. As adults, it seems like we have the willing to just grip it and take it because we think we know, we've been there, we know it all.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think sometimes withdrawal is also protection, but it's also important to create that space so that they can think and that they can open and find their honesty, because it's very risky to be so honest to your parents about what you're thinking and going through.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Yes, it is, and that is all linked to this issue of privacy. How confident do you feel in your emotions that you can share with your parents? And of course, you know, there's a huge push to do things on your own to show that you're you know, you're an independent person, and you know, parents can be very, very supportive, but they can also be, you know, wanting to know, wanting to feel that they're on top of things, that they understand things, and that's hard for the young person. So yes, I completely agree with you. It is a big thing to share sensitive or you know, very intimate things with adults, particularly with your parents. Yeah, I agree. I think that helping parents to stand back, not to interrogate, to let the young person come to them. And one of the things I'm always saying to parents is young people do want to talk. They do want to talk to you, but they want to talk at a time that is right for them, that feels safe for them, and they need to know that you're not going to nag them or interrogate them. They need to know that you're really going to listen. And one of the things that I talk about is, and you probably all have the same thing, there's one-way communication and two-way communication. You know, one-way communication is it's coming to you, I want to know, I'm asking you questions and so on. Two-way communication is really genuinely listening as much as talking. And yeah, that's really important. So yeah, Corinne, I think you and I are on the same wavelength.
And I do think that often, you know, also a child or a teenager, a young person might then look at their parent or whoever that particular listening partner might be and think, oh, they're exhausted, they're stressed, they haven't got the capacity actually right now for me. And maybe that's also a reason why they do shut down. And I do wonder, are we able, when we're exhausted and tired and stressed, to listen properly? And like, that is another huge conundrum, right? When you're in that situation.
Completely. And young people, of course, pick up immediately if the adult is distracted or tired or not. I mean, one of the things that I think, you know, we talk about in the groups is if you are in that state, then be honest. You know, don't hide it or don't pretend. You can say to the young person, you know, I'm just really exhausted at the moment. Can we do this in quarter of an hour or slightly later? You know, and that's part of sharing, of course, sharing what state you're in. But you're right, Penny, of course, and young people pick that up immediately, that they're not being listened to. No one's listening to me. Yeah.
We actually, in one of our workshops, we give away symbolic figures, I suppose, that you can take home. And it's another way that we sort of thought, well, how, if we can't get that conversation going verbally and talking to one another, is there a way you can set a symbol, which is literally to be able to sort of say, if you see this, you know you're not listening to me, and actually you need to. And actually that's also maybe a good thing, to think of different ways how you can set that signal, I need you, you know?
That's really good, really good. Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm, you know, I'm just fascinated. I've always been fascinated by the role of words in communication, because communication is not just words, and often words clash with other signals that you're sending. So I think one of the things about listening, if you like, is it's not just the words, and sometimes the words actually are contradictory. You can send words that say something different from how you're looking, or how your stance is, or where your eyes are, or all those sorts of things. So for me, communication is such a fascinating thing, because we think about it as words, of course, but it isn't words. Words is just one part of it. So understanding that, and we help parents understand that, how they stand, what they look like, where they're looking, where their hands are, all those sorts of things are part of communication, of course, and part of listening as well.
I love, John, when you said about, it's not as the parent in that parent dynamic or relationship dynamic, let's say, or listening dynamic. It's not about us, it's about them. And I think it links really nicely with what Jenny spoke through, is about understanding if you've got something to say, if you find yourself wanting to respond, what is that about you? Is it, we can use, terminology like, has that triggered something, or are you trying to fix it? Do you feel the pressure or or you put in an expectation that there's an answer, but actually to take that moment to think, okay, I might be feeling, thinking, wanting to say, responding like this, but actually it's about them. So I need to figure that out, and maybe there will be the appropriate time. And also, she said the two-way communication, you can still participate in that. You don't have to go silent because you want to figure out your own response to that content, but you can ask them more questions. That is, you can stop what you're doing, sit down with them, and I just think that's really powerful, actually, because, another thing as well, Jenny, where you said, and when I didn't joke, but I shared about my dad in the 10 minutes. Actually, you can be busy, and these relationships might be asking on your time, and you think that you're so busy. But really, if someone's got something they need to share and they need to be heard and they want you to listen, 2 minutes can be so impactful. We do something, well, we do that in our workshops as well. Just having the opportunity to be heard without any questions or responses or interruptions for 2 minutes is pretty powerful. And, if you easily extend that to 3 minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd like to throw a question out to the panel, because I'm currently doing a survey on listening. And I wanted to ask you, who do you think gets listened to in society and who does not? And that's just from your own personal opinions. So, Corine, what would you say to that?
Oh, I really can't answer that question.
Okay, amazing.
Because then I would point out that I know what another person is thinking or experiencing. So I have to hold on. I don't answer that question because I don't know.
Okay, amazing. Jenny?
Who gets listened to more in our society? That's the question.
Yeah, just from you, if you would say right now, if you had to sort of throw one particular group or person, someone who gets listened to and who potentially doesn't.
I think privileged voices get listened to more in our world.
And who doesn't?
People with least privilege. Yeah, marginalized voices. Yeah.
John, any difference?
Well, you won't be surprised to hear what I think, which is that young people don't get listened to. And I think, it from the political arena downwards, it is terrible, really. No one in government really has the role of speaking for young people. The young, and when I say young, I mean, you're also talking up into the 20s. They just don't get a voice. And I think that's shocking. And I think that that is something that we really, really should address. But I also think that parents, particularly of teenagers, don't get listened to. And I think that we need a better system of helping them with good information.
So the tween question today is, why do adults always say listen more but never seem to do it themselves? John, maybe you'd like to add your answer first.
Well, I think it's all to do with the dynamic that develops between parents and young people. And one thing that you could say is that essentially it's a power struggle, that essentially, parents are trying to hold on to the control of the young person's life. And the reason for that is because if they don't have control, they feel anxious. But the young person is, of course, trying to do exactly the opposite. They're trying to take power. They're trying to have control. Now, this isn't always true. And I lots of families I know who say, well, we never had anything like that. So we have to be careful. It isn't always the case. But I think that it is hard, that dynamic between the two generations. There's different values, of course, but also I think that it's constructed so that the individual young person is trying to move towards a situation. They're trying to free themselves effectively. And the parent, because of anxiety and because of the need to hold on, you don't want to let go, that dynamic is established of that sort of conflict. But I promise you, my workshops, or not mine, but the ones that a lot of us do together, parents really do change their attitude. And I've just got so many wonderful comments from parents saying, I've really changed because of what I've learned, and that's very rewarding. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny?
I think it's such a great question. Why don't people, adults, do what they encourage young people to do? It's so much easier to try to invite someone else to do something that's actually not that easy. Listening sounds really simple, and on one level it is simple, but it's not easy. It's a kind of lifelong practice. Yeah.
Just have to deal with it. Corine, for you?
Well, I'm thinking about two things. When parents talk about listening, most of the time they talking about obeying. And so teenagers want you to create a space, a very safe space for him to be really honest about their feelings. But when we say as an adult, you don't listen, most of the time we meant say, you don't do what I would like you to do. And I think that listening begins when when our needs to be right becomes slightly less important than the reality of the other person. And that's really hard for adults because we want to have it right to protect our children. And I think that's really something difficult for adults.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Once you get into that habit, they just know that it's going to be a command or a demand and then if I say to my boys, oh, like, listen, and I actually want to say something that's not asking them to do something, then they're like, and then to kind of break down that barrier, and then it's, no, actually I want to share something interesting or discuss something with you, or still my intention, though. That's quite an important thing.
But now that we're doing so much work around listening, my youngest, who's 7, he's very good now at going, so mummy, you're always talking about listening, now you need to listen to me. So pretty clever too. So thank you so much to our guests Corine, Jenny and John for sharing their insights with us today. This conversation is a powerful reminder that listening isn't a passive habit or a skill we simply master once and cross off a list. It's a lifetime commitment. We all live in an incredibly loud, distracted world. We're constantly busy juggling demands and fighting the pull of our screens. But becoming a better listener doesn't come with an instant fix. It takes intentional, continual practice every single day. If we want to build grounded communities and truly show up for the people we love, we have to treat our attention as an investment and make real space for others to be heard. So, as you step away from this episode, I want to leave you with a question to ponder on. Are you listening as well as you could be? Thank you to our listeners for giving us your time and attention today. If this episode has resonated with you, please share it with someone who might appreciate it and take a moment to leave us a review. We're Penny and Jenny, and this has been Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. Keep noticing, keep listening, and stay curious about the world around you. Until the next time, keep informing those perspectives.